Excellencies, for all the contributions. Let me start with a question of procedure, just to say that we enjoy a very open, frank and constructive relationship with the government of Sri Lanka. We received comments from the government that were carefully studied for any factual details that were then incorporated where the changes were necessary. The formal submission of the report, in fact, was delayed by 3 weeks to accommodate the requests of the government, and since then, in fact, the government's comments and the letter from the permanent delegation have been posted on the website of the Council, and they are fully available for your own perusal. Let me then move to a question. I think there was a concern expressed by the Philippines on the report's failure to acknowledge the challenges related to the pandemic. Let me say, on the contrary, the report fully acknowledges the unprecedented challenges that Sri Lanka has had to face in this regard of COVID-19, but the militarization of the civilian functions highlighted is not really exclusive to COVID-19. In fact, it includes an expansion of the functions of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Public Security in a whole host of areas, of walks of life, the appointment of military personnel to multiple task forces dealing with issues as diverse as poverty reduction and archaeological heritage. And this is, I think, the point that we wish to make. Moving on, I will take the questions as much as I can in order. Let me say, to the question of the EU involving and protecting victims and ensuring accountability. In a country like Sri Lanka, where there are thousands of victims, they must, of course, have a central place in the design and implementation of any accountability mechanism. The national consultation processes that accompanied Resolution 30/1 in Sri Lanka recommended such a victim-centered approach, but we have seen that victims have been ignored and left out. And we are able and have provided technical support and assistance to the government on designing and implementing victim-sensitive procedures in order to make sure that we are guaranteeing victims' safety and dignity, making sure that providing evidence is safe, gender-sensitive and straightforward as possible. And I think this issue, the protection of the victims and their informed consent, is really at the core of the matter. Germany referred to their case against a member of the LTTE and asked what we can help. Obviously, we seek to cooperate with national judicial processes that seek accountability in these cases of serious human rights violations. When we get these requests, we will identify materials in our possession which can be disclosed. Obviously, we sometimes have to redact them to protect the UN interests in documentation. This is obviously a time-sensitive issue, and it's a procedure that is tested. We have over the years accumulated an extensive documentation of serious violations committed in Sri Lanka, and a dedicated capacity would enable us to focus the resources to engage with and respond to such requests with greater speed, efficiency and effectiveness, also providing guidance to victims and civil society in their own efforts to invoke and use these principles. France asked what if there is not a continued engagement with the government. We sincerely hope that Sri Lanka will remain engaged with the Council. I think we are all on the same side here, long-term peace, and that is why this Council has invested so much effort and time into providing the pathway that was laid down in Resolution 30/1. We are encouraged that the government has signaled its commitment here to continue this engagement, and many of you have spoken to that. But not only the government, there are many other stakeholders in Sri Lanka, in particular civil society, which is also engaged. And let me mention the other tracks. So again, there was mention today of the UPR, but the special procedures, the treaty bodies, these are all complementary, not mutually exclusive avenues, and we know that they converge in the end towards these outcomes. The issue of the independence and credibility of national accountability mechanisms, I think it was Belgium. Obviously, building and maintaining the trust of victims and their relatives is essential to any national accountability mechanism. We are concerned that harassment, surveillance and scrutiny by security agencies of families, lawyers and others have undermined the work of institutions like the Office of Missing Persons. Domestic processes continue to be unable to deliver any meaningful resolutions, and this has eroded the principle and the practice of justice, of course. And I think this is why we are now calling for a broader accountability. The Netherlands asked about successful homegrown reconciliation processes. We have offered a lot of assistance to Sri Lanka, and other member states have also offered to share experiences. We have, for example, the Sri Lankan delegation facilitated travel to South Africa to explore lessons learned. I think that's a key one. I think the challenge is that these examples rely on other factors, particularly the political will. I mean, in the end, they have to be custom-made, of course, and nationally owned. And this credibility, in fact, is measured by the trust that is received from victims and other stakeholders. I think we have, one second, I think Switzerland, how will a future mechanism be conceived and set up? There are several models for a mechanism that is, as the report raises. There are the fully independent mechanisms, for example, that have been established in the case of Syria or Myanmar. There is the internal accountability project on DPRK, or a new configuration. I think this is entirely up to the Council to see what is the best fit for the discharge of specific accountability functions. I think most important is that the specialized resources needed to analyze the material and the technological capabilities to store and process large volumes of information are very important. Homegrown. For Canada, how to most effectively support the gathering and preserving of evidence. I think this follows on from my last answer. The High Commissioner is asking the Council and the Member States to support a dedicated capacity in this regard. As I said, it could be an independent mechanism or just a dedicated capacity within OHCHR. Let me emphasize again, there is a huge amount of material documentation and evidence accumulated over the years, and it's important that this is brought together, securely preserved in one place where it can really be made available to support future accountability processes and judicial proceedings, including in member states with the competent jurisdiction. It's a significant and complex task, and we would need the appropriate resources and expertise to work on it. I think there was a question from Ireland, priority actions to support the safe and enabling environment for civil society. The High Commissioner clearly recommends that the government orders all security agencies to immediately end all forms of surveillance and harassment, including reprisals against human rights defenders, social actors and victims. I think this has been, and we've heard some of the NGO voices, this has really had a chilling effect on civic and democratic space. Certain laws have been misused, and I think the government, it seems, is also planning to review the act that regulates the operations of NGOs. I think any legislative reforms must comply with international legal obligations. This is a point made by the High Commissioner, and we must continue to work towards this enabling environment for civil society. And I hope that the diplomatic community will be ready to raise cases where human rights defenders under threat or reprisal should be raised, increasing resources for those civil society organizations. A couple of last comments, I think, from civil society participants, how we should contribute to accountability and why that's so important. I think the report is clear that there is a strong link between the past, present and future in Sri Lanka. The failure to address the past, as we have mentioned on numerous occasions, which would involve ending impunity and ensuring an overhaul of the security apparatus, the laws and the policies have all been put to the wayside. It is essential, therefore, that the Council remains alert and uses the full range of the toolbox that we put on offer to prevent any further escalation. Strengthening the capacity of this office to monitor human rights violations is also essential in this regard. For all these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope I did justice to the questions, but clearly we commend the report once again to your attention and believe that we can work together to explore all avenues to advance reconciliation, accountability, and human rights for Sri Lanka. Thank you.